Every story has a beginning, and this one starts with a revelation that shook my entire world. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world, and it keeps us going. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when my life took a turn I never saw coming. The day had been like any other: work, meetings, and the usual routine. But as I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house, which usually exuded warmth, now seemed cold and distant. I shook the thought off, convincing myself it was just my imagination, and stepped inside. As I entered the living room, I noticed my wife, Sarah, seated on the couch. Her face was pale, and her hands clutched her phone tightly. She barely looked up at me, which was unusual. Normally she'd greet me with a warm smile, but today there was nothing. "Hey," I said, trying to break the silence. "Hey," she replied, almost in a whisper. I chalked it up to a bad day for her and headed upstairs to change. But then something caught my eye. Her purse, which was never left open, was on the dining table. I couldn't explain why, but an urge compelled me to glance inside. There, amidst her belongings, was a receipt for dinner at an upscale restaurant. The problem? I hadn't been to that place with her. A sinking feeling hit me, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she went with friends or colleagues. I wanted to believe that. However, as the days passed, small things began to add up. Late-night texts she dismissed as work-related, sudden outings without explanations, and a growing emotional distance between us. One day, curiosity got the better of me. While Sarah was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I knew it was wrong to invade her privacy, but something deep inside told me I needed to know. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone. The message was from someone named Mike. And it wasn't just a friendly chat. The words on the screen felt like a dagger to my heart. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Last time was unforgettable," the text read. My hands trembled and my vision blurred. I set the phone down before she could notice anything, but the damage was done. My mind raced as I tried to process what I had just seen. Could this really be happening? Was the woman I devoted my life to betraying me? For days, I lived in denial, hoping it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence kept piling up. One evening, while Sarah was out with friends, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but desperation pushed me to my limits. As I parked near the restaurant where she was supposed to be, I saw her walk out hand in hand with a man, Mike. The sight was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't confront her there, not in public, so I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. That night, as she walked through the door, acting as if nothing had happened, I made up my mind. This wasn't a life I wanted to live. The next day, while she was at work, I began packing my things. It wasn't just my belongings I was packing. It was years of trust, love, and memories. As I was zipping up the last suitcase, the front door opened. Sarah stood there, stunned, her eyes wide with confusion and anger. "What the hell are you doing?" she yelled. I stood there, my heart pounding but my mind made up. "I'm leaving," I said calmly. Her face turned from confusion to panic. "What are you talking about? Why? What's going on?" I looked at her, trying to find the words to explain the pain I had been carrying. "I know about Mike," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. Her expression froze, and for a moment I thought she might deny it. But instead she said, "I can explain." Sarah's face was a mix of panic and guilt as she struggled to find the words to respond. "It's not what you think," she stammered, her voice trembling. I folded my arms and leaned against the wall, keeping my composure even though every fiber of my being wanted to explode. "Oh, then what is it, Sarah? Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty clear." She took a step forward, reaching out as if to place a hand on my arm, but I stepped back. Her voice cracked as she said, "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "A mistake. Mistakes happen once. This wasn't a mistake, Sarah. This was a decision. A series of decisions you made behind my back. Her eyes filled with tears, but at that moment they didn't move me. I had spent so long ignoring the growing distance between us, convincing myself it was just a phase, a rough patch every couple goes through. But now the truth was staring me in the face, undeniable and cold. "Mike doesn't mean anything to me," she said, her voice desperate. "Love you. I always have." "Love?" I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. "If this is your version of love, I want no part of it." The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't deny it anymore, and there was no excuse that could undo the damage. The betrayal cut too deep. "I gave you everything, Sarah," I continued, my voice rising just slightly. "I trusted you, supported you, stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay me." She tried to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm done, Sarah. I'm not going to stand here and let you twist this into something it's not. I deserve better." At that moment I realized that I wasn't just angry. I was determined. Determined to take control of my life again. This wasn't going to break me. It was going to define me. "Where are you going to go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Anywhere but here," I replied. "Because staying here would mean living a lie, and I'm done doing that." Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't let them sway me. I had made up my mind. As I walked past her with my suitcase in hand, she reached out once more. "Please don't go. We can fix this," she pleaded. I paused for a moment, turning to look her in the eyes. "Some things can't be fixed, Sarah. And this is one of them." And with that I walked out the door, leaving behind not just a house, but a chapter of my life that was over. Walking out of that house wasn't just an act of leaving, it was an act of reclaiming my life. But as I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my car and drove away, the weight of it all began to sink in. I pulled into a quiet park a few miles away and just sat there, staring out at the empty benches and trees swaying in the wind. Felt surreal. My entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. I replayed the last few years in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. Were there moments when Sarah seemed distant? Times when I ignored the nagging feeling that something wasn't right? The truth is, I had been so focused on building a future for us that I hadn't noticed how disconnected we had become. The first call I made was to my best friend, Alex. "You won't believe what just happened," I said as soon as he picked up. "Tell me everything," Alex replied, his voice steady and reassuring. As I told him about Sarah and her betrayal, he listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause before he finally spoke. "Look, man, I know this feels like the end of the world right now," he said. "But it's not. You're stronger than this, and you're going to get through it. One step at a time." His words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time since walking out of that house, I felt a flicker of hope. The next step was finding a place to stay. Alex offered his spare room, but I declined. I needed space to think and rebuild. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. A temporary solution, but one that gave me the solitude I needed. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed with a notebook in hand. I started writing down everything I wanted moving forward. Goals, dreams, and even small steps to help me heal. Focus on myself. Get back to the hobbies and interests I had set aside. Surround myself with positivity. Reach out to friends and family who truly cared. Build a better future. Set new goals and focus on achieving them. As I wrote, I realized how much I had sacrificed over the years, not just for Sarah, but for the version of us I had convinced myself was real. The next morning, I took the first step toward regaining control. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss the legal side of things. The thought of divorce was painful, but staying in a broken marriage would be far worse. When I returned to the motel later that day, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Can we talk?" it read. I stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone down without replying. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Right now, my focus needed to be on me. The message from Sarah lingered in my mind for hours. "Can we talk?" Those 3 words held so much weight, yet I wasn't ready to face her. My emotions were still raw, and I knew that if I responded too soon, I might say something I'd regret. The following day, I focused on work and tried to stay busy. The distraction helped, but the nagging thought of what Sarah might want to say kept pulling at me. Was she looking to apologize? Defend herself? Try to salvage what was left? Later that evening, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. At first, I ignored it, but something told me to pick up the second time it rang. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Hey, it's Mark," the voice on the other end said. Mark, her coworker, the one I had caught her with. My grip on the phone tightened, and I could feel my pulse quicken. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold and measured. I need to explain something," he said. "Can we meet in person? Please. It's important." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I wanted answers, and this might be my chance to get them. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. When I arrived, Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. "I appreciate you coming," he said as I sat down across from him. "Cut to the chase," I said. "What do you want to explain?" He took a deep breath before speaking. "First, I need to say that what I did was wrong. I knew Sarah was married, and I should have stayed away. I'm not here to defend myself. I just need you to know the whole story." I stayed silent, my expression unreadable, as he continued. "Sarah told me things about your marriage that I didn't question at the time," he said. "She made it sound like you were distant, like you didn't care about her anymore. But after what happened, I started to realize that might not have been the truth." Hearing this only deepened my anger. Not just at Sarah, but at myself for ever trusting her. "So why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Because I've walked away from her," he admitted. "After you caught us, I saw a side of her that scared me. She's been lying to you, to me, to everyone. And I think she's going to try to manipulate you into giving her what she wants." I leaned back in my chair, processing his words. Part of me didn't want to believe him, but another part knew he might be right. "I thought you should know," Mark said. "And again, I'm sorry. I never should have gotten involved." Without another word, I stood up and walked out of the coffee shop. My mind was racing, and I knew I needed to prepare for whatever Sarah had planned. That evening, I finally responded to her message. "I'll meet you tomorrow," I wrote. "But this will be the last time." The next morning, I drove to the cafe where Sarah and I had agreed to meet. My stomach churned with a mix of anxiety and anger. I didn't know what her angle was, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window. Her face lit up as she saw me, but it quickly faded when she noticed my cold demeanor. I sat across from her, saying nothing, waiting for her to speak. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice soft and uncertain. I nodded but stayed silent. I wanted her to say her piece before I revealed everything I knew. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she continued, her hands trembling slightly. "What I did, it was wrong. I betrayed your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me." I raised an eyebrow. This was not what I expected. "I just want to explain," she said, her eyes pleading. I felt lost. Our marriage felt like it was falling apart, and instead of talking to you about it, I made the worst decision of my life. "And you thought lying to me for months was the solution." I finally spoke, my voice calm but icy. She flinched at my tone. "Oh, I didn't think. I was selfish and I hurt you. Hurt us. She paused, looking down at her hands. "I want to try to fix this." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Fix this? Sarah, you didn't just break my trust. You shattered it. You had an affair with someone I thought was my friend. Do you really think we can just go back to the way things were?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I had given her everything. My love, my loyalty, and she had thrown it away. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice cracking. "Therapy, counseling. Anything. Please just give me a chance." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. I've already filed for divorce." Her eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious." I am, I said firmly. You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences. For a moment, she just stared at me, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then her expression changed. The tears stopped, and a flicker of anger crossed her face. Is this about revenge? She asked, her voice hardening. Are you punishing me? This isn't about revenge, Sarah, I said. It's about respect. Respect for myself and what I deserve. And what I deserve isn't this. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. This conversation is over, I said, standing up. I wish you the best, but this is where our story ends. I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. As I stepped outside, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. But little did I know, the story wasn't over yet. The weeks following the cafe meeting were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal consultations, and emotionally charged encounters. I stuck to my decision to divorce Sarah, but her persistence didn't waver. She sent heartfelt letters, tried reaching out through mutual friends, and even showed up unannounced at my doorstep. I stayed firm. I knew that going back would mean compromising the respect I had fought so hard to reclaim. As the court date approached, I began reflecting on everything. My pain, my anger, and my sense of betrayal were still raw, but I also felt a strange sense of gratitude. This situation had taught me the importance of self-worth and boundaries. It was a painful lesson, but one I needed to learn. The day of the final hearing arrived. Sarah and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, separated by our lawyers. She looked at me with tearful eyes, but I avoided her gaze. I knew this was the end of an era, and it needed to happen. When the judge finalized the divorce, I felt an odd mix of sadness and relief. It was over. I was free to start anew, without the weight of deceit and betrayal. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends. Slowly but surely, the pieces of my life began to come together. One evening, as I was organizing some old boxes, I came across a photo album from our early days together. For a moment I hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, I placed it back in the box and sealed it shut. The past would remain in the past. Months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah had moved to another city to start fresh. While I harbored no ill will toward her, I knew our paths were meant to diverge. Looking back, I realized that life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes it throws us challenges that force us to grow. And while the journey was painful, I came out stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. Thank you for following this story of heartbreak, growth, and resilience. If this story resonated with you, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt narratives like this one. This is not just an ending. It's a new beginning. Until next time, take care and stay strong.